Welcome, everyone, to today's Fireside Chat. I'm so excited. We have today with us Dr. Geoff Green, and he has such an incredible, extensive history around sports and neuroscience. He has found a way to combine both of these passions as well as skills into one, and he has been helping leaders as well as athletes and recently corporate individuals in the area of neuroscience. And so he's going to talk to us about his experience. Jeff, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to go through your bio, but before I do that, I just want to ask everyone to go ahead and share this out. We want to ensure that we're motivating other people through this message, and we're getting this incredible message out to others or as many as possible. We also want you to engage during this conversation. So if you have a comment or a question for Dr. Geoff, I'll be checking on Facebook, namely, for those that may have questions. But if you also have questions on LinkedIn, you can still put it into the chat box or comment. We definitely want to hear from you. All right, let's get started. So Dr. Geoff Green leverages nearly a decade of experience in neuroscience to help individuals achieve their academic, business, and personal goals. Dr. Geoff received his BS in neuroscience and Ph.D. in cognitive brain science specialization from the Ohio State University. By curating structured plans tailored to each client, he focuses optimal cognitive performance needed for milestone achievement. Namely, he teaches individuals how to build and maintain healthy, powerful, and successful habits without risk of stress and burnout. In addition, Dr. Green plays the saxophone. Okay, yeah, this is incredible. For professional bands, he travels the world visiting 59 countries across 6 continents. So there's only one continent, is that correct, that you have not yet visited, Dr. Geoff? um, and he plays pro football in Germany. He also runs his own speaking and consulting business named Shift. These diverse pursuits exemplify the implementation of mind optimization, peak brain performance, and transformational self regulation practices that enable individuals to accomplish more at a higher quality. Excuse me. Let's collaborate to break through mental barriers and unleash unparalleled success. It's incredible because you're using both sides of the brain, and we'll talk more about how you do it, Dr. Green. But I just want to start off with what's your journey been like in studying neuroscience and becoming a leading mental performance coach?
Mm. It was a very interesting journey. So I didn't even start in neuroscience. I actually started in engineering. When I was young, I loved just messing with the remote control cars, remote control planes, all of that stuff. And I wanted to just mess with electronics for the rest of my life. So I get to the Ohio State University, and I make it into my major. There's a bunch of weed out classes that you have to take before you can get into your major. Made it into the major, and I realized that I hated it. I did not like it at all. It was very abstract. It wasn't very hands-on. I didn't see how I could help people for real. So I started to do a lot of soul searching and figure out, like, why am I even here, right? Why I'm at this huge university, a lot of opportunity. What do I really want to do? And I got an opportunity to do my own research project. I got funded that summer. I also got funded to go to Brazil to study abroad. So I went and study abroad, cleared my head, came back, and it was time to find a research project. And I came across music cognition, the way the brain responds to music. And so I created an entire research study on it. And I loved it. I ate it up, and I presented it. I got really, really good feedback. And I was like, I can see myself doing this. I can see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And I was already halfway through undergrad. I was going into my junior year. So I was there on academic scholarship. We wouldn't have been able to afford it any other way. So I wouldn't have been able to afford any additional semesters. So by the grace of God, it was able to work out to where I could do the entire neuroscience degree in 2 years instead of 4. So then I was like, that's confirmation from God. I'm gonna go ahead and switch. And I
Sure.
switched into neuroscience, and it was it was the best choice I could have made, because that's actually when I started to have the dip of my story, is what I say. Basically, the point where I was having, kind of an identity crisis. I was lacking self-esteem, motivation, purpose. I still didn't really know why I was here. I was a big people pleaser. Mental health was just all over the place. It
Wow.
was awful. And I realized that I'm in the best major for this. Like, I can take what I'm learning and apply it to my own life, and change my life around. And I realized that, but I didn't really do anything about it. And it wasn't until I got an opportunity to present research in Bermuda my senior year, and I actually had a near-death experience out there in the ocean. We
Wow.
skipped one of the days of the conferences, went out to this
Wow.
part of the island,
Hmm.
ended up getting taken under by one of those riptides.
Oh my
Nobody within
goodness.
eyesight or earshot. Nobody there to save me. Nobody to
Wow.
help. And it's one of those stories where it doesn't make sense for me to be here, except for God. God had another plan. God said, "I'm not done with you." God has a reason
Yes.
for me here. And
Yes.
so that's when I was like, all right, I got to be intentional. I got to stop playing around. Like, this is really my second opportunity. This is my second
Oh
chance.
my
So I
goodness.
started to get my life together, both spiritually, as well as using everything that I'm learning in neuroscience, psychology, self-help and development, and all of that stuff. And once I started to see my life change, I was like, this is amazing, but I don't want to just keep it for myself. I wanted to spread it to anybody and everybody, because I know so many individuals struggle with similar things. And that's how I started to create a platform for it. And that's how I started to help people. I would start to go and speak. I would do one-on-one coaching, any and every way that I could help. That was my new heart project. That was my passion.
Incredible. Oh my goodness, that took me all the way back, Dr. Jeff. I was thinking about what you went through, this near death experience, and how it essentially put everything into perspective for you in terms of purpose and call. Uh,
Mm,
and then it was almost like an illuminating sort of experience that sort of transformed you into the pathway that you're in today.
absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And I always say that, everything happens for a reason. I am a firm believer in that. So though, like, that dip in my experience, in my story, it sucks in the moment. It's terrible. It does not feel good. It feels uncomfortable. I am so grateful for that, looking back. Because if I didn't have that wake up call, like,
Hmm.
who knows where I would have been. Like, I would have been operating beneath my inheritance, is what I call it, or beneath my God given potential.
Wow.
So I'm very thankful for that experience, and for that time, sort of that trough in my life story thus far, because of what it catapulted me into.
Wow. That's incredible. I was in that moment, just sitting there, and then taking it all in. So you said something that I thought was really profound. You said a lot of things, and I apologize. I'm in a school, so if you hear
If
announcements,
anyone's interested, there is
sorry about that. That's me at one of our New York City schools, and they tend to make a lot of announcements, even with the kids not present. So one of the things that you said, Dr. Jeff, that I thought was pretty profound was around not necessarily knowing who you were or dealing with identity crisis at a
Yeah,
certain point of your life. And I was wondering if you could speak to what happens to an individual in a neuroscience manner when they're in that identity crisis place. I think so many people, even adults, are at an identity or dealing with identity crisis and don't necessarily know who they are. If you can speak to what does it look like in a neuroscience way?
absolutely, absolutely. So this actually deals with a lot of stress. So stress, particularly chronic stress. We, in our frontal lobe, there's an area that's basically in charge of self-reference or self-awareness. It's the area that we judge ourselves with respect to our environment, or the things that we know and make sense of in this world. So that's the area where, when there is unbalanced activity there, we could have a negative self-preference, or a skewed is a better word, skewed self-preference. So what does that look like in our behavior? So the behavioral neuroscience part of it, that looks like projecting, right? If I have negative, if I have chronic negative thoughts, those thoughts turn into beliefs because our brains work on repetition. So the more times I think something, the stronger that thought gets. They say the neurons that fire together wire together. So just think of a thought. A thought isn't just one neuron activating. A thought is a neighborhood of neurons coming together, talking to each other, and then going to another neighborhood of neurons and talking to each other and making an entire pathway. So if I have this limiting belief, or sorry, this limiting thought that I continue to think on repeat, that pathway that formed that thought gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Think about yourself walking through a field of high grass. The more you walk back and forth, you're creating a path, and that path gets more and more prominent, right? So when you are doing that, that thought then turns into a belief because of how strong it is. You actually believe it. And the crazy part is we have what's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means that we don't want to believe one thing and see a different thing. So if we believe something negative about ourselves, we are going to try and confirm it in our external environment any way that we can. So that's where then the projecting comes. So if I have a negative self thought which turned into a belief now, I am going to project negative thoughts into what I think somebody else is thinking about me. And this is exactly what I would do. This is where the low confidence, low self-esteem, low worth, low value, all of that came in, as well as mixing people pleaser. It was just the perfect recipe for mental health disaster. And I would go into just different spaces, social spaces, and just because of my thoughts about myself, I would assume that other people were thinking that as well. They weren't even worried about me. Human beings are too self-centered to spend that much time to worry about you in the manner that you think that they are all the time, right? And so you can easily project. And when you project in this person and that person in this situation, you start to become a shell of your person, of yourself. You start to operate and just kind of go through the motions. There's no life, there's no vibrance. You're not even being who you truly are. So then you start to people please to try and fix those negative thoughts that you're projecting on others, and what she thinks about me, or what they think about me when I walk in this room and I get a look, and that look has nothing negative to do with me, but I assume it does because I'm projecting, right?
Yeah.
And so when we start to do that, then we start to people please. And when we start to people please, we lose who we are. We lose that sense of self. We lose that understanding of our values at our core. And I'm a man of faith, so that means that I'm also now putting idols before God. I care about what this human with flippant emotions and opinions and skewed thoughts, him or herself, I care about what he or she thinks more than what my creator thinks. And that's so backwards. That's so backwards. I even heard it said once that when you are trying to people please or be seen in a pleasant light in someone else's eyes, and that's your top priority, it's like looking at yourself but in a broken glass mirror, right? You will never be able to see yourself because you'll be distorted because there's slices here and slashes here and pieces missing, right? The only time where you can do that is when you are looking up instead of out and around. You look up to please God. You look up for your confirmation. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction? You look up for what do you think about me instead of what does he or she or what do they think about me? Then that's where you hit this. It's just like your golden period. That's when you hit the sweep. You start operating in the way that you were created to operate, the way that you were ordained to operate. You start realizing gifts that you have that you never would have actualized because you weren't who you are. You can only operate in your gifts when you are operating in your identity. Your gifts are instilled in who you are. And when you are operating in that confidently and unapologetically, then things start to happen. You start to operate in gifts. You start to realize these passions. You start to feel that purpose, and you start to understand, wow, this is why I'm here. Wow, this is the corner of the world that I'm supposed to touch and change. And life starts to become so much more fun at that point.
And it's another announcement. So sorry about that. It's so many things you said, Dr. Geoff, that really spoke to me, and I think to those that are listening and watching right now. I think so many people are disconnected from their own selves and don't really understand their sense of purpose. A lot of people are walking around not knowing why they were created, why they're here, and they're questioning it. And not just children and young people, but adults, 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and so on, may not be connected to their purpose. But I love what you talked about, that when when you're able to pull yourself out of these projections that are very real. When I teach about projections, I often say that it's the story we're telling ourselves, that there's an internal story we tell ourselves, and then there's an external story that we tell other people. And most of the times those stories are not aligned. So we tell ourselves and what we telling people are not matching, right? And I think what you talked about was just that we a lot of times we're projecting. And I'm wondering if you can speak to specifically what does projections look like. So what does it look like for a person to go through, or how does a person know that this is what they're doing, that they
Yeah,
are projecting? And
yeah.
then I
So
want to talk about confirmation bias as well. But yes, please.
yeah, absolutely. So projecting is actually something that's difficult to catch while you are in the act of it because it becomes normal. It's your normal way of processing. It's your normal way of thinking now, And so it really takes a lot of self-discovery and self-study. So the same way that you study a girl that you're interested in, you learn everything about her. You study a man that you're interested in, you learn or you study a subject or you study a craft. You also need to study yourself. We rarely ever study ourselves because it's ourselves. We never really think about that. But
Right.
it's a way to catch these projecting thoughts and
Mhm.
confirmation is by um, I guess while you're in the self study, you're studying yourself. It's called metacognition. So you think about your thoughts. Oftentimes we just have a thought and boom, we execute off it, or we allow it to spark an emotion within us because of that thought or that thought or whatever. But rarely do we take it another layer deeper. We have a thought, but then we think about that thought. So if I have a thought that comes up, instead of automatically having an emotional response to it, and then later on having a belief that comes to that thought, one easy thing that I can do is I can write the thoughts down, write these thoughts down that come to my mind. They could be negative thoughts, right? Negative thoughts. And whenever a negative thought comes to my mind, just throughout the day, I just have a journal or a piece of paper and I write it down and I track it, right? And at the end of the day, or at any time, it doesn't really matter. You go through those thoughts. One, it's great that you've allowed time in between that thought and then you reviewing that thought, because when you had that thought, there was a state of mind that you were in that was not your normal state. There was some for some reason your cognitive processing was off. For some reason there was some type of stress or limiting belief that caused that thought, right? Or this not caused the thought, but that further perpetuated that thought. So when you create that separation and you later on are in a relaxed state, you're not stressed with this, you're not stressed with that, you're not thinking about him, her, or the other, it's just you. Then you go to those thoughts and you're in a collected manner. One, you might already see, wow, like I don't even know what I was thinking in that time, in that period. We have different states of our neural processing. In some states, we could think something, and because we're in a stressful environment, stressful mental space, we're in survival mode, which means we're in survival cognitive processing, which means we're not thinking clearly all the time. So when you go back and revisit those thoughts in a calm and relaxed and collected manner, where you have clarity of thought, where you have full activity and everything is passing through the frontal lobe, which is your executive functioning and being able to think things through logically instead of just emotionally, which is in your limbic system, your amygdala, then you can see the reality, right? So that's step one, creating that time, that separation. Step two is once you see that thought, and it's still something that bugs you, like, wow, I wonder if that is true, right? You then write all of the things, the ways that that thought is true, what proves that thought. You write all of the evidence for that thought. So if the thought is, um, I'm not good enough at my job, right? I'm not good enough at my job. That's the thought that I'm dealing with. I can do the 5 why rule. 5 why rule is basically going 5 layers deep on that thought. So why do I not think I'm good at this job? Well, my sales are down compared to my colleagues. Boom. Okay. Why are your sales down compared to your colleagues? Well, I just haven't been able to focus as much, right? When I'm at work, I'm thinking about home life, and when I'm at home, I'm thinking about work life, and I can just never seem to get it right. Okay, cool. Why can you not focus? Why is your mind in two different places at the wrong times? Well, I'm a newlywed. We just moved into a new place. We've already got, a couple kids and another on the way, and just it's a new dynamic. We haven't done this before, and then you can continue to go. It doesn't have to be 5 layers deep. Some may catch it at 3, some may catch it at 7, right? But you get to a point to realize, okay, that's the reason. It has nothing to do that with me being good at my job. I am just in a situation, in a season in life that I've never been before. I am being pulled physically, building this house and reconstructing it. I'm being pulled mentally, staying
Mhm.
up with the kids, making sure they got everything, as well as dealing with the new spouse and the new living situation in the new community. And we're far away from our family, and just learning all of this stuff, and so on and so forth. And you realize that you were never being fair to yourself. You
Mhm.
are great at your job. You are fantastic at your job. The other individuals at your job who have these amazing sales records, they're not going through half of what you're going through. So then you are able to show yourself some grace and realize I'm actually doing a great job. The fact that I'm balancing all of this is
Mhm.
a miracle in itself. And once you realize that, you pinpoint what you need to take care of, and then there's just a domino effect. You take care of the home situation or whatever it is that you landed on, and then everything else begins to fall in order. So I mean, there's so many different ways that we could tackle it, so many different techniques and methodologies, always depending upon the person that I'm working with or whatever the thought or the limiting belief or the projection is. But that's just a quick example of ways that you can catch yourself. It's always thinking about thinking, which is the scientific term, is metacognition.
That is so good. And I love everything you're saying. Absolutely. What I love about metacognition, Dr. Jeff, is the pausing part. So I think most of our behavior, and you said this, is about 90 to 95% is subconscious. Our reactions are we are on autopilot. We are just doing what we've always done. We are not thinking about the thinking. And so
Hmm.
what I love about metacognition is it forces you to pause. You can either count, especially if you find yourself in a conflict,
Hmm.
or you notice. I was just talking to my staff about this yesterday. We talk about like hot buttons and hot and cold cognition, but knowing your triggers in your hot buttons and knowing when it's happening, so most people don't know when they're being triggered, right?
Hmm.
Most people have no idea. And the thing about it is if you've built this sort of burying this up in the amygdala for so many years, it's not in your prefrontal. And so is just buried all these
Hmm.
traumatic memories or these things that you've sort of suppressed.
Absolutely.
And so metacognition, and it allows you to really be aware of your thoughts and be self-aware. And so I absolutely love it, and I teach it to my staff leaders that I work with all the time. So I really, really appreciate you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And you're spot on the way you summarize that. That's spot on.
Thank you so much. So just moving along, and I know we only have about 2 minutes. We probably got about 2 minutes, but I think one of the things that I want you to share about, and you kind of touched on this already, um, but stress. Right? Stress is real. And you talked about bad stress versus good stress. But
Hmm.
so many people, I think what I see are dealing with bad stress.
Hmm.
There's an overload of their cortisol. They're just overloaded. They're chronically stressed out, which are leading to all these different other issues. Um,
Hmm.
wonder how does stress affect our ability to be productive, to be
Hmm.
present, and to be focused?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then what are some strategies to circumvent that for bad stress?
You said our ability to be productive, to be focused, and what
Present
else?
and present.
And present.
Mm.
Absolutely. So with stress initially can be a good thing, right? The way that our bodies innately respond to stress. As I said before, it's, we have improved memory formation. We have increased energy and production. We have an enhanced problem solving skills. We have enhanced immune function. All of it is set up in a survival mode for us to exist from this moment into the next moment. That's good. However, if I were to stay in that stressful state, that's when my ability to cope is less than the amount, the obstacle that's in my way, for example. So we've heard of the situation where the parent gets in a crazy amount of strength to lift something to save a child, right? That's a very stressful situation. But the way that the mind and the body responds, and it activated, the nerves that contract the muscles in a way that it's never done before in order to save the child. That's a very stressful moment, but the cortisol release allowed them to solve the problem, solve the solution, right? Now, if I were to tell that parent to hold that thing, whatever they were lifting to free the child or to save their child, and just hold it for 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, their arms would crumble, their hands would cramp up, right? Their muscles would start to tear, all of that in only 5 minutes. The crazy thing is, a lot of us hold our stress for 5 years, 10 years, right? Sometimes half of our lifetime, sometimes majority of our lifetime. Some things we've never let go, right? And so if that's just the way to paint the picture of what stress is doing to you when you hold on to it, even if for just 5 minutes. The initial stress is fine, but when you have that constant stress or that chronic stress, well, then our body is sending its energy, right? Sending the rejuvenating blood cells to the areas of the body that need to be healed or rejuvenated, right? And that's all throughout our body, because when we have chronic stress, we have a decrease in our immune system. We have a decrease in our defense mechanisms, right? And so there's so many areas of our body, right? Our heart, our lungs, maybe our throat and our larynx, right? Maybe the afferent muscles or anything like that, that we're sending and recruiting resources to, and we're taking away energy from our brain. The way our brain works is it sends oxygenated hemoglobin to areas where functions need to happen. So if I were to do finger tapping, right, my motor cortex is receiving oxygenated hemoglobin in order to do the computations that allow me to lift up my hand and have the dexterity to tap my fingers together like that, right? When I am sharing that energy resource with all these other parts of my body, then it's taking away from the effectiveness and efficiency of my cognitive processing. Cognitive processing is required for all the things that we listed, for productivity and for focus. So, for example, and we'll get into being present in a second, but productivity and focus, in order to stay productive, you need to have sustained attention, which is focus. That it relies on the frontal lobe, right? The frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex. If I am not recruiting the necessary resources, basically, if I don't have the oxygenated hemoglobin, the activity in this frontal lobe, I'm not going to be able to stay focused. On top of that, going outside of the neuroscience for a second, if I have something that is just on my mind, take away the neural activity. If I have something that is stressing me out and I try and focus on doing this spreadsheet or doing whatever I have, doing these outreach emails or making these calls, every few seconds, my mind is going to go right back to what the stressful thing is. It's going to go right back to what the stressful thing is. And that's, again, another survival method. If there's something that we know is wrong, we want to try and fix it. Now, the unfair part is we can't fix it right then where we are. The stress happens when our mind goes into the foreseeable future or the recent past, when we are not present, right? And we try and fix something or we're anticipating something that's going to happen, which causes anxiety, or we're constantly thinking on something that did happen, which causes depression. We are not present, and that's where our body it's like a cycle. Then we become more stressed, and then we're taking more away from our brain and sending it to different areas of our body, right? So in order to be present, and it can be just simple techniques that we practice. 2 minutes, right? Think of closing up with this. Think of your brain as a puppy, a new puppy. The puppy, you set him down on the carpet and he wants to just explore everything. He wants to lick this and smell that and play with this and do all of that stuff. That's exactly what our mind is. It wants to hop all over the place, right? Imagine yourself telling the puppy to just sit. You're training the puppy, sit for just 2 minutes. After you sit for 2 minutes, we can go on a walk, we can go to the park, you can play with your favorite toy, you can run around the house, all of that. You reward the puppy for sitting for 2 minutes. Same thing with our mind. If we just tell ourselves to sit and focus on one thing, it could be something that we see, it could be something that we hear, it could be something that we taste, any of our senses. We just focus on that one thing. A lot of people do our breath sensation. So focus on the rhythm of our breath, focus on the sensation of the breath going inside, in the nostrils and out the mouth, whatever have you. That's training your neural resources to increase the activity in our frontal lobe in order to have sustained attention. Then after that 2 minutes, you reward yourself by allowing you to go and check whatever you wanted to check or do whatever you wanted to do. That 2 minutes felt like an eternity, but the more you do it, what we say earlier, the brain works on repetitions. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And then you're able to do it for 5 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 2 hours, right? So on and so forth. Now, every brain needs a break for sure, but you always want to be able to increase the neural resources required for sustained attention in order to be present. That's with the work part, right? But that's the same with social aspects, being present with your family, being able to focus on what your wife is saying, what your husband is saying, what your kids
Yeah.
are saying, instead of worrying about things that are happening at work. That is a very crucial part, not only in work, but also in our family lives and in our social lives.
No, it's so good. We got to do a part two because we're out of time. And I think this information is life saving because we're not really, most of the time, what I've seen is we're not always present and aware. You think about the dinner table, everyone's on their devices, or, I had to do it yesterday. I pulled up my computer. I'm like, I got to take this meeting at dinner. And it's like, what are
Mhm.
you doing? Like be away, like be in that moment. And I think so much of our life, especially here in America, is living for the next moment, and not being present in the moment that we're in. And so, I appreciate the information that you have given, the strategies, the insight around our neural resources. I just want to say this last thing, and then I want to give you the last words. And that is, I believe the most powerful thing that we could ever have, and the greatest form of currency, is our mind, but it's
Mm.
often the most wasted. And so, we talked about mental blocks or mental weights, if you will, that tend to keep us not focused on purpose, on
Mhm.
what we're supposed to be doing, on family, right? The things that really matter in life. And so, whatever you can speak to in closing around, how do we master, what does mindset mastery look like for us so that we can be more productive, and I think have a better quality of life, which is what we should. I think we're typically stuck between thinking about the future, worrying about the future, and stuck on the past. But can we
Mm.
be present and move towards the future? So, anything you can speak to in closing on mindset mastery?
So mindset in itself is a very broad term, but with respect to that, as far as being present and building the future that we want, right? Life is about balance, right? You want to be present, but you don't. You want to also be able to plan as a responsible adult, as a responsible human being. You want to have a plan, right? The way for that is you have to believe in something, right? People believe in different things, but regardless of who you are or what you believe in, human beings were never created to take everything on their own. As far as the weight and the pressures of the world and society and expectations and requirements and all of that, we were never created to take on all of that. Whether you believe in God or whether you believe in the Big Bang, if you have an individual that is stressed out, it's because of cognitive overload. It's because of stress. Our bodies were not meant to take that. Our brains were not meant to take that. So there has to be something that you do to unload that, right? So if you're a believer in Christ, I can just speak on that because that's what I am. And it's really interesting because there's not a lot of scientists that also believe in Christ. And that's something that that's a whole nother conversation because that required me to dig deeper in my faith, right? And ask all the questions that I didn't really have answers to. Science is all about show me the facts, right? And so
Mhm.
it was a difficult time for me, but a necessary time. However, you have to have something that you're able to have faith in, something that you're able to put your hope in. Because what that does is that takes your mind from always being here, always being there, always being everywhere else instead of being here. Here, there's so much the gift of transformation and the power of change is in now. You can't develop and grow and change now as a person if you're always in the anxious future or the depressive past. You have to be now. Now is where the epiphanies happen. Now is where the realizations happen. Now is where the perspective shifts, the mindset changes happen. It all has to happen in now. If you're not cognitively present in now, if you're not studying yourself now, if you're not thinking about how can you make this moment special for my family, for my kids, it's something that they will remember for the rest of their life, one of the good, positive core memories. That's where all the now happens. If you're not doing that, then when you look back 5 years from today, more than likely you're going to be in a very similar situation because nothing has really changed. All of the change, all of the transformation doesn't actually sit in your future and tomorrow like a lot of people think. It sits in right now. And when you think of right now, each and every day you're changing an incremental amount, adding more and more and more to it. That's how you set up a great future without stressing yourself out in a way that we were never meant to be, or having to handle things that we were never required to.
Oh my goodness. We got to have a part two. This is so good. I'm also a believer, and I'm not probably not supposed to say this, but that's fine. The Bible talks about now faith, now, right? There's something really powerful about the now. And I
Hmm.
think that speaks to the present, about being here. And it's a powerful place to be, but we don't spend time there. We're
Hmm.
either in future or we're in the past,
Yep.
but we're not here. And so we have to talk about the power of the now and a second live. But
Yeah.
this has been so incredible, so uplifting, and I think it's helping a lot of people that are watching and that will be watching later. And I'll lift up Tiffany through a point that says this is a great live, and Carol that says this was excellent, good information. Wish I had all this on paper, but this was so good. This is incredible. Thank you for sharing this space, sharing your insights, your neuroscience expertise and resources. And it's just a testament to what can happen when you tap into your purpose.
Hmm.
You're able to really understand your gifts and flow in it, and you're absolutely doing that. So thank you. I'll give you the last words, and then we'll officially close out.
Yeah, absolutely. My big thing is just remembering who you are. We talked about a lot of things, um, but it all comes down to identity. I'll say this, and then I'm gonna shut up. The number one desire of man is the same for everybody. I don't care who you are, what your name is, where you were born, but it can look like different things. It could be money, it could be love, it could be business, it could be family, whatever it is. That all is under the umbrella category of fulfillment. Every human being wants to be fulfillment. Now, the way that they see that fulfillment can be different. We are all after fulfillment, but how can you reach fulfillment unless you've reached that state of self-actualization, right? Which is reaching your potential. How do you reach that self-actualization unless you are walking in your purpose? And then how do you reach that purpose if you don't know who you are? Because that purpose is tied to who you are. Who you are is your identity, plain and simple. So at the end of the day, I will always say the root of a lot of things that we're going through is just not knowing who we are and whose we are. And that's where the work begins.
Incredible. So incredible. It begins with knowing who you are. This was so incredible. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Geoff, for just pouring out your wisdom and your knowledge, and just all that you've brought. It's been illuminating and transformative. So I hope that those that are watching, I know this was good. So do us a favor and share this message out. Share it out to as many people, colleagues, people that you love, you care about. Share it on your page. Comment later on if you're watching this live later on. And also, we just want you to stay in touch with us. Do us a favor and follow us on all social media platforms at iRaise.org. That is YouTube, LinkedIn. I don't know if it's still called Twitter. I keep saying this. I think it's something else. Um, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. Follow us on iRaise.org. Don't forget to also subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can get updates about all of our upcoming episodes as well. Remember that every Friday we're releasing new podcast episodes on Elevate. So make sure you are checking out our page for those live episodes that are being released every Friday. And also don't forget to follow me at Shaniqua E. Moore. Lastly, I'm sorry, Dr. Geoff, how could people reach you if they would like to reach out?
Absolutely. They can reach me on social media. It's at Dr. So Dr. period GeoffDGreen. So at Dr. Geoff D. Green. Also, my website, which is www.geoffdgreen.com. Email, which I can send out later, is shift@geoffdgreen.com. Any of those work. And I'm always, posting content. I post a lot of lifestyle content. So things that I am going through, epiphanies, revelations that I have, as well as content that's just straight to the facts. Like, how do we, avoid imposter syndrome? What's the psychology and the neuroscience behind that? So on and so forth. So any of those platforms or methodologies work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geoff. And we also want to invite you out next week, Monday, I believe the date is July 1. We'll be having an Entrepreneur Youth Summit in Atlanta. So those that are in the ATL area, if you have a young person between the ages of 11 and 19 years old, we still have tickets open. We would love to see your kids there, to love on them and pour information onto them. We have incredible speakers, presenters that will be there giving your kids golden information. So July 1 is the date. And that's all, guys. We appreciate you all so much. We will see you